Focused attack will end this foe. Why do you not use them?
This moment forth, thou art risen. Charge adore.
Hello everyone, this is Anthony from Super Gamecraft, and welcome to the review of Dragon's Dogma 2. When this game was announced, it was a fantastic surprise to fans of Dragon's Dogma, including me. But whereas the first game was a curiosity that turned into a cult classic, the second game now comes with hype and expectations. While some things were gained, and some were lost, Dragon's Dogma 2 still maintains the identity of the series.
The Sovereign!
The plot has a consistent, mysterious tone throughout. It begins with a fancy noble party introducing the Sovereign, the ruler of Vermont, which is interrupted by the ominous message from one can only assume to be the dragon. It becomes a confusing narrative for the next hour where our newly met protagonist escapes an excavation slave camp on a griffin, then promptly gets shot out of the sky. After walking to a nearby town, the Pawn Legion greets our protagonist as the Arisen, one with exceptional will and chosen by the dragon that devastated a town. The story of our protagonist Arisen will involve digging into the conspiracy of the leadership of Vermont, saving towns from monsters, and traveling the land to uncover plots attempting to influence the world. With how much larger the main and side stories appear, the narrative experience will vary depending on how much and which side content is completed. With side quests completed as I came across them, but focusing mainly on story quests, the result received was quite flat in many areas, with most locations the characters not showing much development. This may have contributed further to the final apocalyptic portion of the game, leaving things continuing to be shallow and ending just as abruptly. It is not in the game's nature to make all quest starting and continuation points obvious to the player. Explore the world, talk to characters, have patience, and the world shall reveal its nature further. That said, even with more side content completed, the characters and stories are rather average. While the world is much larger, the emotional depth displayed is not this game's strong suit. Some of the cinematic charm of the first game has been lost, and the dialogue and music do not reinforce the story's themes to the potential one expects from a cult classic sequel.
Welcome, Arisen. We pawns have long awaited your arrival.
Well, I'll be. A pawn summoning before my very eyes.
Part of the narrative is adventuring with pawns. Between the many pawns that the Arisen chooses to aid in the journey, there are also various caves, ruins, and monsters the party will encounter, with fights influenced by the vocations, skills, and equipment used. Pawn dialogue variety has been improved, with more distinct personalities, but they are still charmingly repetitive in their conversations. What has been somewhat lost in the sequel is the subtle finesse demonstrating the connection between the pawn and the Arisen. The first game had underlying themes throughout the final story section that were more impactful, with wandering pawns lamenting the loss of their masters. In Dragon's Dogma 2, it is displayed passionately and briefly inside the rather abrupt ending. The pawn's prowess in combat seems slightly less useful compared to the original. It is somewhat hard to gauge if all of them are contributing in a meaningful way. At times, they will deliver very obvious strong attacks that are a huge benefit in big monster fights. Other times, they run around rather aimlessly and attack for little damage. With only 4 hand gestures the mute Arisen can give, it's not easy giving directions against a new foe. This can be addressed somewhat by reviewing their sheets to make sure they are equipped to what is needed, but they are about as intelligent and dim-witted as before. Pathfinding continues to be a moderate struggle. Sometimes their walking paths are loose, they can't decide between walk, run, sprint, or they get flummoxed by a ledge. During the heat of combat, pawns give direct combat advice far less. While they are not repeating endlessly about striking the tail, they do not give much advice at all, unless the Arisen's on fire or had a water bucket fall on them. General combat feels just like the first game, meaning good feedback and encouraging use of satisfying abilities. There are slight improvements to movement, responsiveness, and a rework of vocations. Part of this rework means only 4 ability assignments, and only 1 weapon for most vocations. The reduced ability flexibility compared to the original game is a minor hindrance at first, but the refinements in the combat and clear distinctions between vocations more than make up for it. Difficulty on the first playthrough is mostly fair, aside from a spike going into the desert region Batal. Combat is somewhat Souls-like, and involves fighting packs of enemies on the road, and regularly encountering a lacking variety of large beasts and monsters. Learning patience and correct use of class skills will make a fight turn out for the better. With moderate improvements, it is now more satisfying to experience the great highs of climbing and defeating a large creature.
But one we surpassed with skill.
Fortune favors us, it would seem.
With limited fast travel, much of the journey is on foot, and the Arisen will be traveling back and forth many times on the large map. The landscape and views feature art that is highly consistent with Grancis in Dragon's Dogma 1, but now with the new desert and volcanic regions. Cities are much larger, there are a few more towns, they feel a little more alive, and the NPC behavior and dialogue are consistent with what is found in Grancis. The gameplay outside of the combat is very much the same, including the shopping, equipment upgrades, and general questing. Providing considerable danger to the world are perilous roads with a lot of monsters, small and large. Fighting small groups or a single giant enemy seems straightforward, but some fights may occasionally result in even more monsters and giant beasts joining in the middle of the fray, resulting in an overwhelming mess. Due to the high monster population, it is difficult to walk in the wilderness without getting attacked every couple of minutes. At times, a giant beast may appear unexpectedly in the middle of a peaceful walk. While one can save before or after each fight, there are only 2 save points, one shared between the manual and checkpoint saves, and one for in-rests. This means dying can put one back a little bit, or very far back. Finishing a progressing quest causes a checkpoint save, meaning that getting an undesirable outcome and wanting to change it means going back to the in-rest save point. Or maybe the outcome cannot be changed at all. Why would Dragon's Dogma make this design decision on purpose in today's age of gaming? It creates risk. It means having to accept less maximum health per death. Retreating from bosses and situations that are too overwhelming is preferred. Prepare for the unexpected on the road, but carrying too many items will weigh you down. It means checking your pawns if they are ill, and addressing it accordingly. The overall journey at times can feel regularly inconvenient, annoying, infuriating, and yet many of these design decisions define an experience that is lacking in many modern big world games. It is a journey that is parts tedious, frustrating, and exciting. It takes some effort to see the best the game has to offer. It continually tests the will of the player to see if they settle on the simple route, being merely content, or strive to see the journey to the true end. It is a gameplay experience that resembles the trials and journey of the Arisen. While its artistic potential was not realized to the degree of its predecessor, Dragon's Dogma 2 remains committed to the gameplay design of the series, and in doing so created a flawed, but clear, adventuring identity.